Okay, so this video is going to focus primarily on Haraway's Cyborg Manifesto article. And you will find here on our website on the syllabus the link to this article as well as the link to Frankenstein MD, which is abbreviated as FMD. So go there for that information. And you will also find on our general website under this week an outline here. It says Haraway's Cyborg Manifesto outline blank. And I want to give you a little background on why I'm giving you this outline. And it's because when I was a senior in college, it was my last semester right before I graduated in college, one of my professors gave me this article to read and to outline as my final exam. And I did really poorly on it. Because she didn't give me any background on who Haraway was or what a cyborg was or how to read this article, period. And it's a very dense article. And so the article that she gave me was 16 pages long, and the way that she had printed out. And I created an outline that was 16 pages long because I didn't know how to differentiate between what was important and what wasn't important in the article because I didn't have any sort of entryway into figuring out what in the world she was talking about. So I've created this outline. It's 1 page long, and you are to download it or print it out and fill it in either typewritten or with your handwriting as we go along. And this will be a way for me to give you an entryway into figuring out what Haraway is saying, because her argument is very important. It's a seminal article in new media theory, and a lot of people refer to it often, and so it's important that you know how or know what she's talking about so that you can say, oh yeah, Haraway, the cyborgs, I totally get that. So get your outline out. Also, before you watch this video, I do encourage you to read the article first. I know I just told you like it's really dense and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but I encourage you to read it first just so that as I'm going through, you're going to have something to connect what I'm talking about to, not just the specific points I'm making, because as I've said many times, and I will keep saying, these videos are not a substitute for reading the assigned reading. So because this article is so important, I do encourage you to print it out, read it now, come back to this video, and then after the videos are finished, read the article again. Just, skim through it again, just so that you're like, okay, now I can make sense and I can connect what Dr. Astrike said to what I'm reading in Haraway's article. All right, so those are my warnings for you. Heed them or perish. Okay, so if we start with the outline and refer back to this article here, you'll see that it says the title is A Cyborg Manifesto, Science, Technology, and Socialist Feminism in the Late 20th Century. And then the subheading is An Ironic Dream of a Common Language for Women in the Integrated Circuit. We're going to be talking about, as we progress, what she means by woman, how the socialism comes into it, how the feminism comes into it, and how these all relate with the integrated circuit. So leave whatever sort of stereotypes that you have about feminists and socialists and integrated circuits at the door, because Haraway is going to take us on a ride. All right. So the first thing I want you to do is to recognize that the main metaphor of the article is the cyborg. Okay. And her big argument is that cyborgs are a fact of the present rather than the future. When we think about cyborgs typically today, we think the Terminator, right? Like this big manly man who has technology integrated into his actual physical body. And he has superhuman powers, superhuman strengths due to this blending of humanity, over the top humanity, because he is or was perfection in many ways, and in technology into one organism. But she's asking us to think about a cyborg and more broadly, and she argues that there are 3 current border crossings. And notice it says current, because they're here now. They're here today. We are cyborgs. This is one of her main points. We are cyborgs. Don't forget that. So first of all, she talks about the blurring of human and animal. And she connects it to mythology. And, we've all seen these sort of man-horse creatures. And we have one here who's getting ready to throw a rock at the tiger. More powerful than a tiger, because that tiger had killed another man-horse. But we've also had them in the fact that we give animals rights today, in many of the same ways that we give humans. In fact, a lot of times animals have more rights than humans in certain very specific scenarios. But we view animals as deserving of rights like humans. That's another sort of blurring of boundaries. We don't view animals as separate from us, as having less rights than humans. So also we need to think about the fact that those of us who are carnivores, who actually eat meat, that, once you actually ingest a chicken, or part of a chicken, hopefully you don't eat a whole chicken, or ingest part of a cow, or ingest part of a pig, or part of a fish, that animal then is integrated into our bodies. And, there's no longer a whole fish that's swimming around. Instead, we take that part of the fish, or that part of the chicken, or that part of the cow, and we turn it into energy that keeps our humanity going, that keeps us alive. And so there's another boundary blurring. Where does the fish begin or end and the human begin? Finally, also, the time period when Haraway was writing this article, pig heart valve transplants were really in the news a lot. And this is hard for us to even really imagine now, but I was alive then, and I do remember it, where people were saying, this is blasphemy to put part of a pig, probably a pig specifically, into a human body, to take part of a pig's structure and use it as a replacement for the heart valve in a human. And again, once that part of the pig is implanted into the human, and the human is using that animal part to stay alive, literally to help their heart beat properly, where does the animal end? Where does the human begin? Again, the animal has been integrated into the human, and now they are the boundaries that separate animal from human has become blurred. So that's the first border crossing, the blurring of animal and human. The second border crossing she talks about is the blurring of human and machine. Interesting, isn't it, that this isn't the third border crossing, it's the second. So the blurring of the human and the machine. And McLuhan and Haraway have a lot in common. And I think it would be helpful for you, again, to think about when she says the blurring of human and machine, not just the Terminator style, but the way that all extensions, all technologies, anything that extends human powers is itself a machine or technology. And so one thing I thought we could look at to start thinking about that right off the bat is plastic surgery. And this is a picture of Mickey Rourke, who is a famous actor. You've seen him. This is what he looked like 30 years ago, and this is what he looked like about 5 years ago. He's obviously has had like a brow lift, and he's had something under his cheeks. I don't know, something under his eyes. I don't know. He just looks really strange in person now. And there's something horrible has happened to his skin. When he tries to move his face, it does not work properly. Maybe it's Botox. I don't know. But again, the way that medical interventions have turned us into cyborgs, again, the blurring of the machine's imprint on our humanity. We can think of breast augmentations, where there's actual synthetic goods placed inside of humans' bodies. There's always the rumor that the Kardashians have had butt implants. I don't know. I'm not going to weigh in on that controversy. But different kinds of ways in which humans and machines have become integrated. Not just in the machine gun arms, but now we no longer use pig valves for heart valves with heart surgeries, but we use synthetic, man-made materials to replace the heart valves. And so again, we have this blurring of human and machine when we put technology into our bodies, or wear technology on our bodies, that there's this boundary that gets blurred. My glasses, for example, I was once in a farming community where everyone who lived there farmed, and I was there for a while before I realized that not one person in that community was wearing glasses, and that's because they didn't need to. I, on the other hand, in order for me to do my job, in order for me to function, I have to have some sort of extension, some sort of technology that allows me to read for extended periods of time. So I am a cyborg in that way. I cannot read if I do not have my glasses. So the third blurring that she talks about is the blurring between the physical and the non-physical, which we've discussed this before. We refer to it as the virtual world. And it's here where she really starts honing in on the idea of the integrated circuit. And the idea of the integrated circuit will come back over and over and over again. So I wanted to give you a simple definition of what an integrated circuit is. Most of us recognize this on some level as the thing that runs our computer. We can't physically see it right now. It's inside of the case. But nevertheless, it's making all of this possible, what we're doing right now. But an integrated circuit is a circuit of transistors, resistors, and capacitors constructed on a single little semiconductor wafer or microchip in which the components are interconnected to perform a given function. Now, this is a video, so you can rewind it all you want if you want to write down that entire definition. But I want you to really pay attention to what I think is important for this class and for this understanding of Haraway's article is an emphasis put on the components are interconnected to perform a given function. And so Haraway draws on the integrated circuit in order to come back and tie in this metaphor of the cyborg as a bigger metaphor for not just humanity, we are all cyborgs, but all of us cyborgs together are working together in the integrated circuit that is our culture. Okay? So again, the cyborgs, which is us, are all working together like an integrated circuit in order to produce our communities and our culture. Okay? And so this is what she's coming back to over and over and over again throughout the rest of the article. Now, for part 2, when we get to fractured identities, she talks about how feminist political organizing in light of cyber politics. Now, one thing I do want to draw your attention to is that when she's talking about feminist political organizing, she is using woman and feminist throughout this article as sort of a stand-in for humanity. Now, when I was growing up, and I'm sure also this is still talked about today, when you guys were coming up through elementary, middle school, and high school, people were talking about how we shouldn't use man as a stand-in for humankind, because even though people argued that man meant humankind, women looked around and went, hey, we're not men. So if you're only saying man, then how can you say, well, by implication, you're including women? Haraway is using women and feminists in sort of that same way. She's saying women and feminists, and it's supposed to include men. And so if you are a man, I want you to think about that, like how it makes you feel to be excluded from, an identity that you don't feel ideologically or culturally attached to. When we're talked about our entire culture in terms of women instead of in terms of humanity. And I think that experience helps to make more clear why women and a lot of men argued over the years, and we've been really successful at it, saying we should use humankind and humanity because humankind and humanity includes both men and women in its very definition. So you can't use man as a substitute for woman. So it's difficult to use woman as a substitute for man as well. And so pay attention to that as she goes forward. Almost out of time on this video, so I'm going to pause here, and when we come back, we'll start talking about part 3, the informatics of domination.